Well, yeah. As per usual, I'm off kilter. The whole stream is off kilter. Like you do. It's a Wednesday. What can I say? I think it's Wednesday. It feels like a Wednesday. Who knows anymore? Any rate, I am back here with another chapter. For those of you who are just tuning in, I am currently reading my dad's novels. It's my first read through, so I've never read the story before. So I will be stumbling, umming and ahhing because that's what I'm doing. And I'll be taking all of my favorite highlighters, going over and marking out things because I'm marking up for editing. As I'm reading, I'm going to be marking out anything that sounds a little awkward or is misspelt, that sort of thing. And I hope that I provide you a little bit of entertainment that way. So without further ado, I bring you Chapter 18, fantasy novel, Sword in the Rose. We'd best wait until we have reinforcements, suggested Forwraith. I think not, declared Gwalsor. There's already fire, so we may be late as it is. Best if we try to take the castle from them while they're reorganizing. Brennan was in his mind, but he pushed that thought back. She was probably safe. Marquian would want her alive to give his rule some sort of legitimacy. Still and all, when a castle fell, there were too many possibilities for deaths to happen, whatever orders Marquian might give. He pulled himself back to the present. Fire's most like from the town outside, Forth was saying. And that be meanin' someone's been careless. Anything burned be making the castle less useful for a supply base. We wait a bit, we can make more sure of having the force take on whoever's over that hill. The trouble with that is we've sent messages and with only a vague knowledge of who might be loyal and who might not. We've some hopes of, and that's it. How long will they need and to gather their forces in March? If we go in now, we take them by surprise, we might be put to the rising. Forwraith took a deep breath. We just gallop in like this, my Lord Baron? No. For one thing, Dar Irrelevant almost certainly has people watching for us, and a force waiting for us across the main road somewhere. As I recall it, though, there are several lesser tracks that can bring us down to the castle as well. Find me some people among the archers to slip forward and do away with the watchers, and to find for us where Dar Irrelevant's people are waiting. Then we'll slip down to one of the other tracks and charge in. They did a little more talking after that, since everyone could tell the Baron had made up his mind. They waited then while Forwraith sent word as to what sort of people he wanted, with baronial promises, as a will as whole, that none of them would be sought out later to answer for charges for poaching. They waited further, while orders were given to the chosen men, and continued to wait as these slipped off into the gathering dusk. They waited, restraining their impatience as night fell. At first, Gwalsor was able to feign patience. As the night went on, that became less and less possible. He found himself striding back and forth in front of the soldiers, who were quiet and waiting, as soldiers will, sleeping, or gambling, or telling stories. Loksoya! The voice was I guess it'd be Loksoya. The voice was soft in his ear. Because it was Malga, he held himself back from snapping out an answer. He forced calmness on himself. I seem a little on edge, do I, Malga? Oh, yes. Just like there seems to be bits of antler on Marthop's head. Of course, the soldiers all know the circumstances and understand the impatience. He whipped his head around. Know the circumstances? Does everyone know everything, then? Malga shrugged. You were raised in the castle, or do you know how they are? Everyone who knows who's who in which bed. All trained at Grandel Castle know, and most likely all who join us since hearing about it. And I say, they are very understanding. Older ones have mercy. That means you'll have two tasks in the coming fight. One is to make me go to the right direction when the crossbow quarrels begin to fly, and the other is to keep my mind on the battle until it's truly won, and I can afford to go off looking for who's still alive in the keep. Malgalthop grinned briefly. In the meantime, go have a little talk with Jedal. He's worried too. Gwalsar went looking, and found his page busily burnishing an already bright shield. Careful, Jedal. You'll rub it so thin people will be able to poke holes in it with their fingers. Then what will a room be? The boy's head jerked up, a guilty expression suddenly clearing as the words came through, and he realized that the Baron was making fun of him. Do you need me, Lord Baron? Not exactly, but you look worried. Oh, not for myself. Your mother? Yes, I wish we could just rush in quick like at Gwila's Hole. Ah, but at Gwila's Hole, they didn't know our main force was coming up behind them. Darharelevant knows we're coming up behind him, and he'll have a force waiting for us. I'm hoping we'll be able to get around him and into the castle without much loss. But won't that be dangerous? It took Gwalsar a moment to realize that the boy was referring to the danger for his mother, and knew that saying so would seem careless of the lives being risked in battle. Oh, there's danger for certain. Your mother will be safe, though. Darharelevant will want her alive, to marry her, and to give him some legitimacy after I am dead. But things happen in battle, no matter who gives orders against them. Saldra's tears. The boy is using all my arguments against me. Aloud, he said only, yes, that's true. But if we let ourselves be paralyzed by what might happen, we'll end up doing nothing all our days. Don't you worry about my mother? It was almost an accusation. I do, and believe me, I thought long and hard about what I'm doing. But you know the situation as well as most. We can't wait, hoping for reinforcements, because we don't know what reinforcements we can expect. I hope a quick strike can take them by surprise and end it. And the only way to make things perfectly safe, or almost perfectly safe, would be to do nothing. I think even you would not have me do that. I suppose not, but the boy did not look happy. For a brief moment, Gwalsar considered saying that as Jedal grew older, he would know the hard choices that had to be made. But even as the thought came to him, he knew just how much that would help Jedal. He nodded and walked away. The night stretched on and on. Though he would not say so, Gwalsar was beginning to fear that the worst had happened. The scouts had been discovered and killed, allowing Marquis and Darharelevant to know just what they had planned, and to upset those plans with a maneuver of his own. Then 4/8 was approaching, a grim smile on his face. We can move now, my lord. The way is clear and is being kept open. Good! Jedal, my horse! As they sat on their horses, waiting for the rest of the force to ready itself, Gwalsar asked, have they been able to see aught of Darharelevant's dispositions? Very little, my lord. There are campfires in several places, but to try to determine how many people are at any place would take too long. We'll be mostly responding to what we find on the other side of the hill, then? 4/8's mouth set in a grim line. I like it no more than you do, my lord. Perhaps we should wait until at least morning? Gwalsar shook his head. Too much time for Darharelevant to send scouts of his own over the hill and find us. It is as it is. We'll be arriving on the field little before sunrise, and we should be able to see enough then to make a decent choice regarding tactics. Or we may run into an ambush in the dark. Gwalsar wondered for a moment how much his concern for Brynin was affecting his decisions. No, if I was certain of being able to count on any of my night holders waiting till dawn, even waiting for reinforcements, would be a possibility. As it is, our best likelihood is the quick attack, catch them by surprise, and use that to our advantage. The moon was low in the sky, silvering all the armor and arms showed in the force. The archer was leading them, followed by a small party of 10 armored horsemen and an advance party. The Baron, the Marshal, and the rest followed after. They took the main road for a time, which allowed them to ride two abreast. Shortly they turned off onto a lesser road, nothing more than a wide track through the woods and brush. Here mounted men could only go single file, and in some places where the oak forest was denser with the overhanging branches, they could only walk, leading their horses. There was little speech, only an occasional waffling snort from a horse, along with the sounds of hooves, the jingling of harnesses and accoutrements, both men and animals. The silver leaves on the silver trees whispered as men brushed against them. The night had become cooler as it drew on to morning, and at the times when the marching column had to pause, men shivered and moved around to warm themselves. Eventually they were going downhill, slanting off to the north. Wellstar knew that he'd been here hunting and had just gone out riding, but in the starlight nothing seemed familiar. Merely thinking about riding brought his mind once more to Brynn. Older ones keep her safe. And almost in that same moment he implored the older ones to help him keep his mind on more important things until the battle was won. The moon was out of sight just beyond the trees now, and only starlight allowed them to see anything. They were traveling slowly, and Wellstar schooled himself to patience. Riding madly ahead without being able to see the trail or trees would be foolhardy and dangerous. The trees thinned. Did he recognize this place? Or was his mind deluded by his fervent desire to have this over with? They continued to march. The advance party paused, and he reined in his own horse. The archer came flitting back on silent feet. Lord, we've come out of the trees now. Thank you. The men who are to scout out Darher Relevant's positions, are they here? Not as yet, my lord. It be early, though. Send them directly to myself or the marshal the moment they arrived. Yes, my lord. Wellstar half-turned, gestured for 4/8 to come up beside him. We're coming out of the forest. We'll have plenty of time to form up and make ready before anyone sees us, or before anyone can see anything, before we can see anyone else, for all of that. Seems things are going according to plan so far. Father's boots and belt buckle, my lord. Don't be tempted in the old ones so. I wouldn't be saying such things until the battle's done and won. May the older ones grant it. Wellstar smiled briefly, and then recalled his own father expressing similar sentiments in similar situations. The captains passed the order down the line, and the army began to move out of the trees. Dawn was lightening the sky. 2 archers approached. They were both slightly built men, coming silently out of the shadows. In the dim light, there was little to distinguish them until they came closer. Then it would seem that one of them had a round face, and the other hands and feet which seemed a little too large for the size of his body. The one with big hands served as a spokesman. My lord Baron, they be inside the castle already. Wellstar's heart sank. The men continued. We be thinking, though, that the inner keep be not yet in their hands. There be a banner above her, and we got close enough to see she don't be Sir Markian's, and we think it fairly sure she be the Sword in the Rose. What are Darher Relevant's troop dispositions between here and the castle? The man drew a dagger and began to draw on the dust on the trail. My lord Baron, this road she go round so, and be joining with Tonsek Road here, leading up to the castle here. There be camps here, here, and here. This last one, you'll be going right through her if you be riding to the castle. Are the gates open? Yes, my lord Baron. What do you think? They want to beat us in the field, get the thing over quick? 4/8 nodded. I'd say so. Why would they want to do else? Castle's more for a firm base or a final retreat. If they have the forces, they'll want to beat us in open battle. Since they gathered their forces long before we gathered ours, they would likely feel more confident about outnumbering us. He drew a deep breath. All that being so, my lord Baron, I be agreeing with your notion of getting into the castle quick, though I don't be sure how possible it might be. They expect us to come, but they don't expect us to come this way. If they did, there'd be forces drawn up across our route. Now, what we'll want what we'll want to do is get inside, then close the gates behind us. The trail we're on comes out between the forces that Markian has across the roads, so we can bypass all but the one camp. Markian knows his business, but he doesn't have unlimited resources. I suspect he's expecting us to have a try at one of his outer defenses, from which we'll be driven off, and retire to gather our loyal forces before trying again. Gwalsar knew the battle to get inside would cut his own fighting force, but it had to be done. He looked over at the archer. What else we should know about? Naught else, my Lord Baron. Thank you. Marshal, have the orders passed. We get to the castle as quick as we can, then close the gates behind us. Pick a good mixed force to keep the gates closed. Most of the archers should go up onto the walls to deal with people outside. We'll ride up at a trot as though we're just another party moving in to help Dar Relevant. When we come to that camp astride the road, at the first challenge, we unfurl the banner and attack. If we have to fight there, I want 10 horsemen deployed to keep the way open for the infantry. Yes, my Lord Baron. There was a wait then, while the orders were being passed. Gwalsar swung up on his horse. Malgathup came up beside him. It'd be seriously good if Dar Relevant die in the fighting, not taken and hanged. Maybe others will, because maybe it might make the others more resentful. And this is the same Malgathup who on our first day here advised me to hang a few practically out of hand? Malgathup grinned. Maybe I'm growing a little soft-hearted in my old age. Old age? Ha! I'll wager you'll still be around to train my sons to the sword and set them on their first horses. Lafetta's eyes widened a bit. Sons? Something you may be not telling us all? Gwalsar felt a moment's annoyance, then grinned. No, only that I plan to survive this fight and have sons. Forraith came up. All ready, my lord. Forward, then! Off they went. Dawn was whitening the eastern sky as they wound up the road to the castle. Gwalsar wondered whether or not they'd be lucky to get past that camp on the road without an alarm being raised. No, best count on having the alarm raised, then any surprise would be a pleasant one. Surely Dar Relevant would be expecting him to have loyal knights to his standard, and that being so, one of the purposes of the camp athwart the road would be to see just who was coming in. Perhaps, though, the people in that camp would be a little shoddy in their duties, seeing that Grandal Castle was as good as taken. He looked up to the castle, and in the light he could see that the sword and the rose was indeed flying over the keep. Someone had done his duty well. Whoever it was had made sure of holding the keep. That man would have to be rewarded. As it grew more light, he realized that there was another thing he had not considered. His colors would be recognizable in the daylight, and no subterfuge could get around that. Still and all, there was only one way to the camp athwart the road. There's only the one camp athwart the road, and if they dealt with that, and the older ones were smiling. Ahead he saw a man standing, leaning on a spear, apparently at least half asleep. The fellow had been on sentry duty, obviously, but sure in the knowledge that the nearest enemy were mewed up in the keep of the castle, had taken his orders lightly. Gwalsar grinned. If Markian found the sentry in this condition, he'd have the sentry's back. The sentry's head came up suddenly. Who goes? Reinforcements, said Gwalsar. It's even true. The real question is, reinforcements for whom? That gained them a few more paces as another figure stood up from the side of the road. No, Markian had not been fool enough to set a single sentry. He'd just not been able to impress the need for alertness, particularly in the small hours of the morning, on all levels of command between himself and the undercaptain, who actually picked the sentries. The sentry apparently recognized the colors. He was opening his mouth to shout when something whipped past Gwalsar's head and a dagger sank in the sentry's throat. Gwalsar kicked Ballas into a gallop, drawing his sword. The sentry had barely time to raise his spear to guard himself when Gwalsor struck. The man went down. With what seemed like a dreadful clatter. No one seemed to take any notice yet, though, and that would not last very long. Someone would hear the noise and investigate. He felt an urge to kick his mount into a gallop, but his force was small enough, and he needed to keep them together, foot and horse. They continued on through the camp, as calmly as if riding on parade. Then a trumpet sounded back in the camp they'd gone through, howling the alarm for all and each of the rebels. Gwalsor turned his head to look at the banner bearer. "Banner!" he said. Nope. Yeah. "Banner," he said. Then, looking back up the road towards the castle gate, he shouted, "The sword and the rose!" Now he spurred his horse into a gallop, and in his mind he knew somewhere up there was a man winding a crossbow to take a shot at that fool leading the charge. But Brynjan was a prisoner somewhere up there. He gritted his teeth and kept himself steady. Dar Relevant must have been confident of his own abilities. The main great gate was wide open. It made sense in a way. It would be easier to bring troops and supplies up into the castle to reduce the keep or the main strong siege against it. There was a guard party at the gate, but the attitudes of the leaders had been passed on to their guards. They'd taken the Baron by surprise. They had his castle, all but the few who held out in the keep. And the Baron, though he was still abroad, had but a handful of men with him. How could he possibly fight his way through the force that surrounded the castle? Gwalsor felt a moment's annoyance that Marchion should think so little of him as a foe that he did not see all the possibilities, even unlikely ones, then grinned as he realized where his thoughts were taking him. Marchion would not underestimate him after this morning. So for a time there was confusion. Then the officers began to shout orders. Only then did the men run to close the gates. Gwalsor tried to urge his horse to more speed. All too slowly. They were approaching, and all too swiftly the gates were being closed against them. Then suddenly he was striking at the men to form a line to hold until the gates were closed. Slash, slash again. Then he was between the gates, attacking the men who were closing the right-hand valve. Malgo was beside him, Forraith barely behind, then more of the horsemen. They cut their way through and entered the castle itself, which was just now being alerted. The murder holes in the archway of the gate had not been manned. Overconfidence, indeed. Now there was a melee in the courtyard, though few of the rebels were armored. Everyone would have to put off their guard armor for the night, save those who were on guard. This put them at great disadvantage in fighting against the Baron's men, though many of them had fought hard for all of that. Gwalsor did not hear who first cried for quarter, but suddenly the plea was being taken up all around the courtyard. Rebels tossed aside their weapons and shields, holding up their hands in surrender. "Get them together! Hold them under guard!" shouted Forraith. "Get that gate closed and man the walls in front!" Shortly after that, they began clearing the castle, raising the siege of the keep. Most of the men who had been besieging the keep had come out to fight in the courtyard, so there was little left to do. Gwalsor took off his helm and pulled back his coif, then approached the keep. "Hello, the keep!" he shouted. "Your Baron has arrived!" The door to the keep was 10 feet off the ground, and reached by a narrow stair that wound up the side of the tower. There was no room outside the door for anyone to set up a battering ram. The door, of course, would be barred, and the gate and the stairway inside blocked with whatever heavy, bulky items were at hand. There were sounds inside, and faces looked down from the tower, from the arrow slits as well. There was a buzz of voices, and some trick of sound had brought a few words to his ear. "Him! It's old Hook Hand! Him!" He smiled a little, wondering if he should have waved his left hand to demonstrate that it was indeed him. Someone called down from the tower, "My Lord Baron, they'll be clearing the way." Gwalsor nodded. "You've all done well here. I'll not forget it." He urgently wanted to go look for Brynjan, but knew that this was more important, and someone would come and tell him when Brynjan was found. Still, it was difficult just sit there waiting, almost as difficult in its own way as sitting watching the enemy crossbowman cock his weapon. Then the door grated open and a man stepped out. He was of medium height, armored only in a brigandine and a light helm, with a sword belted at his side. But Gloucester couldn't remember which of his men it was. The man reached the bottom of the stair and spoke. "You are very welcome indeed, my Lord Baron. Vranian, who has been in charge of the defense?" "I have. There have been few other choices." He was down off his horse, walking forward. It took all his self-control not to take her in his arms. "How did all this come about, then?" "As I understand it, the first group came up claiming to have orders to rally here for a campaign. They were required to camp outside, which they did. But they brought a small party in to collect rations. They brought armed men in, hidden in the bottom of the carts, who leaped out as they passed the gates, attacked the gate guards, and managed to hold the gates open while a larger force came in. Ralno and a few others got me from my quarters and to the keep. Ralno was killed in the rear guard while the rest of us got inside." He looked at the bandage on her cheek. "You yourself fought?" Her eyes flashed. "I did. I have no intention of being a mere game piece on Marquis de Hurlevant's board. I took a sword and I helped cut our way to the keep. We've been holding it ever since." "No," he thought. "Marquis will not escape this time. Not though Wardick and all his men descend on us at once." Aloud he said, "Write me a list of the men who held the keep with you. I told them they will not be forgotten, and by father's boots they will not." He spoke more quietly, so that only she could hear. "You will not be forgotten either. But there have been several thousand other things I must do to secure the castle." She smiled. "If you forgot, I would remind you. Never fear. Go on, see to it that we're safe." Alrighty. So that is another day, another chapter. And so I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll be back again tomorrow. And so I'll talk to you again really soon. Have a good night.